Story 1. A kid in my first or second grade class said she was feeling sick and asked to go to the bathroom. The teacher lost her temper and told her no after scolding her severely. The kid proceeded to vomit all over everything, got sent out to the bathroom, and eventually made her way to the principal's office once she stopped dripping. It was a very bad day for a 7-year-old. This was one of many terrible things that teacher did to elementary school students who lacked the finesse and language skills to persuade their parents that she was truly terrible. My parents didn't believe me about her until I was in my 20s. Hers is the only grudge I hold. If Miss Ellard is still alive, I hope it's because her next of kin refused to end her life support despite terminal pain and suffering. Story 2. My friend broke his wrist, which was obviously broken, on the playground, and I ran inside to help the teacher find an ice pack. It took at least 5 minutes before I lost my patience and ran inside because, around a year earlier, I came across one while cleaning the principal's office, which was deserved, though, because kids weren't allowed to go inside during recess while I helped both the teacher and my friend. I had to stay in the principal's office and had detention for a week. Story 3. For getting beaten up. I kid you not, the principal once told me that if I don't fight, I won't get in trouble. I let this kid bully me and punch me repeatedly in the face, just to avoid getting in trouble. I was still sent to the principal's office, and then told by him that I was in a fight, so I'm getting suspended, even though I didn't fight. From his point of view, by getting punched in the face, I'm involved in the fight. I never trusted authorities again after that. Story 4. Oh, let me tell you why I got sent to the principal's office in 7th grade. My shop teacher walked up to me and kissed my hand, then kissed my mouth. I slapped his face, and he told me to go to the principal's office. This was in front of every single kid in that class. The principal called my mom. I remember she was in that office within less than 10 minutes flat. They called that shop teacher down to the office and told me to wait outside the office with the school secretary. I'm 50 years old now, and I can still hear my mother screaming, ripping them a new one. I was moved to home economics class. My mom made a police report. Her boyfriend was a cop. Nothing else ever came of it. That teacher left the school at the end of the year. Story 5. In 6th grade, I cut a dime in half on a paper cutter and was given a week of in-school suspension for making weapons. The school was in Washington, D.C., and the principal also called the Secret Service for defacing money. An agent actually showed up. He spoke to me for all of 30 seconds, basically saying I would have been smarter to use it at an ice cream truck, and half a dime is no use to anyone. A science teacher who took a shine to me later told me that the agent spent half an hour with the principal, explaining that his call was foolish, an absolute waste of time, and not to do it again. That made the week in-school suspension go a little easier for me. Story 6. I'll always remember the time I took the Madagascar compact disc to school to exchange it for the Ice Age compact disc with a friend in 9th grade. The compact discs didn't have covers, and when the principal caught us exchanging them, he assumed the worst and called our parents to school. But then, when the principal opened the compact disc on his desktop, it was playing Madagascar. My parents were annoyed for being called to school for no reason, and the principal had to apologize. This all happened in India, and it was quite an unforgettable experience. Story 7. Spent all of lunch recess in the bathroom because I had a nasty bout of diarrhea. I was told I should have asked permission before going back inside. He later apologized. Story 8. They served dinner rolls in the cafeteria at lunch. Around 4th grade, a teacher sent me to the principal's office for sticking my finger in my roll. I was not throwing it at anyone, just sitting there bored and playing with my food. I got 5 licks from the principal. Even at the time, I thought this was ridiculous. I still do. This was back in the days when if you got in trouble at school, you didn't dare tell your parents, and you hoped they didn't find out because you'd just get in more trouble at home. Story 9. In high school, I was eating an apple in the hallway before homeroom. The vice principal wanted me to throw it out, and I refused because I didn't want to waste food. As a result, I got detention and was released as soon as the buses left, forcing me to find a ride home. At lunch, I found the worst-looking, bruised, mushy apple one could find and brought it to detention with me, leaving it on her desk. Story 10. running to a trusted teacher's room when a girl was chasing me with a terrifying sharp weapon. "What the heck?" he literally said. "Well, you should have gone to the gym coach." It happened in the locker room after physical education. I asked him what on earth he thought I was going to do, stop and consider who to go to first. "I was about to be stabbed, you idiot." I actually said those exact words. This memory is so strong it is like it happened yesterday. He just stood there, slack-jawed, and then, without saying anything else, said, "Okay, go back to class." What a dimwit. Story 11. I was sexually assaulted in the mudroom by 8th grade boys when I was in 6th grade. When I told the principal, he admonished me for saying such horrible things about such nice boys. I was an avid reader, and he told me to stop making up stories like the ones I read in books. He wanted me to take him to our school library, as if that is the only library, and show him which book I got my story from. I gave up. I switched schools 2 weeks later when I told my mom I wanted to die. But I did not tell her about the assault because I thought she would do the same thing as my principal. I was a good kid, but my parents always took the teacher's side because they were also teachers and I was a kid. Story 12. I got interested in the Salem witch trials when I was about 11, and as a fast reader who hyperfixates, I had checked several books out of the library on the topic to read. I kept these books on my desk and carried them around while doing my research. One of the other kids in my class went crying to the principal that I was a witch, so I got called into the principal's office to explain my choice of reading. Thankfully, the principal took one look at my books, saw that they were all nonfiction/history, and pretty much laughed me out of the office. For context, this was the early 90s, so the satanic panic was still going fairly strong. Story 13. I hugged a friend who was away for over a month with enthusiasm. My teacher claimed I was assaulting him, so I was forced by the principal to write apology letters to my friend and the teacher. I refused, and my parents had to get involved. Story 14. I got pulled into the principal's office for selling pornography and Playboy magazines. They searched my bag and locker and found nothing. Turns out another kid who looks like me was the culprit. Story 15. I got sent to the principal's office for a paddling that was meant for my identical twin brother. There were embarrassed apologies made the next day. Edit. My most upvoted comment on Reddit is about taking my twin brother school paddling at the age of 9. Story 16. Refusing to deny the existence of negative numbers. I cannot recall the exact details of the assignment, as it was several decades ago, but I got into a shouting match with my first grade teacher over an assignment where we had to arrange numbers to make new equations. We had not been taught negative numbers officially, but my dad had taught me how they worked while I was in preschool. Even as a tiny kid, I was still a huge nerd. I kept arranging the equations to give both positive and negative results, but the teacher only wanted positive answers and got mad at me for doing it wrong, but she could not explain a right way to do things that made any sense, just basically told me I was cheating. I got sent to the principal's office, explained the situation, and he was like, "Yeah, I do not know why she is not letting you submit those answers. If you want, you can hang out here and read until that assignment is over. I will talk to her after class." He did, and the teacher apologized to me the next day. That principal was a good dude, and part of the reason I eventually ended up getting a teaching degree. The teacher, not so much. Story 17. Saying Texaco instead of Texaco. Even had to go home and tell my dad. He worked midnights and was sleeping when my mom woke him up. I told him what happened. He laughed, gave me a hug, and went back to sleep. Story 18. I wanted to do stand-up comedy for the talent show at my high school, and the principal requested that I come to her office and perform my act in front of her and her alone. She was not amused and said I couldn't participate in the talent show. Story 19. 3rd grade. Wrote a swear word with pretzels on the lunch table and showed my friend. We laughed. Somebody else sitting at the table told on us. We didn't get to have recess for the rest of the week. Story 20. 16 in high school. The vice principal dragged me to the office for literally holding my boyfriend's hand during lunchtime. It was a public school, not even religious, and I had never heard a rule against hand-holding in my life. She was making me late for class after lunch while she was calling my mom at work, and I knew she was in for it. My mother is a nightmare and did not appreciate being bothered at work and having me out of class for something she's seen me do 100 times with my long-term boyfriend. The vice principal got yelled at, my mom is very scary, and told never to call her at work again. I knew that's exactly what would happen, and I hope the righteous teenage smirk I gave her walking out of that office still haunts her to this day. Story 21. At the very British-inspired international school I attended, when we were done with an assignment in class, we were supposed to sit with our hands on our heads until everyone else was finished. I was a ridiculously fast reader and completely incapable of sitting still with nothing to do, and I was also 5 years old, so I got sent to the principal's office almost every day. My parents just gave up trying to discuss this with the school in the end. Story 22. I got detention for computer hacking in the 90s because I guessed the teacher's password on the school network. It wasn't my fault that every user's password was the teacher's initials plus the name of the school. Access. The password that made me a computer criminal. Story 23. Monday morning. I was suspended for participating in an impromptu school walkout about the dress code on a Friday. I was sent home. However, I was at home with my dad and was ill on that Friday. Dad's start hours were later. He had received a written complaint letter from the principal's office, as did all those who walked out, and was reading it as I opened the door after being sent home. He asked me about it. Blindsided, the walkout was news to me. To hear the principal's reaction on the phone with my dad, dressing him down for suspending me without evidence, would have been awesome. On my end, my dad was my hero. My dad told me I could go back to school right after. Instead, I got to stay home and watch TV until my siblings came home. The next day, I was called into the office again for an apology from the principal. Until I graduated, he never called me into his office again. Dad remained my hero until the day he died. Story 24. They had us read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and assigned an essay examining the themes and discussing how we relate to them. The teacher probably said institutionalization 100 times to hammer home the central theme of the novel, and I really only had the one institution in my life to relate it to school. I didn't write about my school in particular, just how the public education system, in its need to impose order and follow a rubric, can promote authoritarianism and repress the individual. I expected every paper submitted to be pretty similar to mine because it's the obvious response from a high school kid. Anyway, I was expelled for subversion. Story 25. Smoking in the girls' room after school. I am a male, was 18 at the time, and also had an after-school job. It just happened that a girl with the same name as me was the culprit, and our assistant principal was not very smart. Story 26. I had a kid make a comment about my long hair and being a disgusting Indian. I turned and looked him dead in the eye and said, "Custer made a comment like that once." The teacher was trying so hard not to laugh but sent us both to the office. Story 27. Story time. I had water bottles at the top of my locker that were half filled with water, just old. Forgot they were up there. The art teacher, who was a menace, was monitoring the hall that day, just to make sure kids are going to class after lunch. I noticed her standing really close to my locker but did not think anything of it. So, I go to English class and within 15 minutes, I look up because my principal is calling me to come with him. Talk about an embarrassing moment. So, I walk with him down to his office, he sits me down and tells me I've been accused of having alcohol in my locker. I literally freaked out. I was in 7th grade. Who the hell would tell my principal that? I was a good kid too. I asked him if my mom was pranking me. He chuckled and walked me down to my locker. We opened my locker up. He looked confused and pointed to the bottles of water at the top, grabbed them, opened them up, sniffed them, and just kind of stood there like, "Okay, sorry for your time," and walked me back to class. I'm like, "Am I in trouble?" He's like, "No, you're good. I will call your parents." Still not explaining anything to me. I went back to English and I sat and figured it out. My art teacher, who hated all children, told my principal this nonsense. Oof, my mom was livid, but it's something to laugh at years later. Story 28. Grade 2 or 3, some girls kept asking me to give them snake bites, like an Indian burn, where you grab their forearm and twist the skin in opposing directions. They did it to each other, to me, and I did it to them, then got called in after recess. They knew I was a good kid and I was beside myself, crying about it, saying we were having fun, and they kept asking me to do it harder. The principal did take pity on me and realized there is no way I could hold down 6 girls and give them each a few snake bites, but advised me not to do that again. I left with a sucker and confused as can be about the whole interaction. Story 29. In elementary school, during the 6th grade, our class was given 1 cookie each before the morning recess. It was supposed to be a treat. Another kid and I saved our cookies for lunch. When we came in from recess, everyone complained that we hadn't eaten our cookies, and we were told that we were being difficult and should eat them. We said we were waiting for lunch and wanted to save them. Off to the principal's office for refusing to eat our treat. In kindergarten, I weighed about 20 pounds and was never hungry. We got an 8-ounce carton of milk for lunch and had to shake it to prove it was empty before we threw it away. I never wanted all my milk. I used to sit at my desk and sulk over my milk while the other kids played. The teacher got fed up one day and brought me to her desk. She poured my milk into a glass to show me how small an amount of milk I was being asked to drink. I said that it's the same amount of milk regardless of the container. Off to the principal. I guess I had food issues,